add some light into
Jason
it.
Anderson, who covers the Kings for Sacramento Bee, joins us now. Hello, Jason.
Oh, okay.
How are you?
I'm all right, guys. How are you doing?
We're doing
Good.
fine. Thanks. We know you're busy. First things first here, you went to social media today to clarify your reporting on Keegan and Keon. So we just want to give you and I know you clarified that on your own, but what is accurate now as far as how the Kings are feeling about them and potential deals?
That's some fun. Not clarifying my reporting, clarifying the kind of, the aggregation. The way I reported it is what I know to be true. It was in regards to Keegan and Keon. The Kings would be reluctant to trade either one. They're young, they're versatile, they're strong defensively. The Kings need more of that, not less. I wrote that the Kings would be reluctant to trade them. It was kind of put out there that they were off the table and staying put in no uncertain terms. So that's the part I just had to just kind of clarify. No shade in anybody. I just wanted to make it clear what I was actually reporting, which was important to put out there. So, I think they would be reluctant to trade those guys. I think a lot of the interest they've received up to this point, and this may be changing in the last day or two because of the Kevin Durant deal. I think most of the interest has been in the younger players. I would throw Devin Carter into that mix as well. And then, now that the domino has fallen with Kevin Durant, I think that begins to set the market for some other guys that have been discussed, like DeMar, like Malik, Sabonis, Levine to whatever extent. But to my knowledge, as of recently, there was just nothing very actionable coming their way in terms of trade proposals and talks for those veteran guys.
Well, I'll just say this, Jason. I know you're a class guy and you don't want to cast aspersions on anyone, but it's not that hard. If you're going to aggregate people, just quote what they said rather than twist their words so that you're not even aggregating correctly. That's just poorly done. So I'm glad that you took a moment to clarify that for us.
Yeah, and then again, you almost hate to do it, but I think you probably must have read the story because I don't know that I don't even know that I included that little nugget in the Twitter kind of teaser.
Yeah.
I don't think I said anything to that effect on Twitter. So I think, somebody must have read the story and still just misstated it a little bit. And again, I'm not, casting shade at anybody. I just want to,
I'm casting shade. That was unfortunate.
Words matter. Words matter. And the way context and the way you contextualize something is very important, and I just needed to make sure that what I was saying was understood clearly.
Yeah, according to Jason Anderson, I'm reading this right now, Jason. Keegan and Keon are generating strong interest, but the Kings would be reluctant to part with either player given their age, versatility, and defensive ability. So that's just getting that out there. How much do you think, Jason Anderson of the Sac Bee joining us, how much do you think Scott Perry is initiating calls versus people inquiring about his players, our players here in Sacramento?
Oh, I think it goes both ways, especially this time of year. I think everybody's talking to everybody, I just think, again, like I said, with some of these guys on this roster, and I do think they'll entertain a lot of different ideas. They could go multiple different directions here. They will look at everything. I don't think they're going to leave any stone unturned here, in figuring out how to optimize this roster in a way that allows them to go forward and remain competitive. I don't think there's any appetite or desire for a tear down and a rebuild. I think they're going to try to retool this on the fly. And so, they're going to have those conversations and it could be any number of guys that ends up being involved in a deal, or, frankly, it could hold until, closer to the trade deadline. There could be pieces that get moved in or out now but this is going to be a process. It's not all going to happen overnight, most likely. So, between now and February, they're going to look at everything. I'm sure, Scott and his team are initiating a fair amount of those conversations. And I know they're getting calls on some of the guys on their roster. So we'll see what makes sense for them. There's been a lot of talk about DeMar. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that DeMar's not here this season. That's kind of been assumed.
Yep.
But one thing, I think we can say about Scott is that he values professionalism. He values depth. And DeMar is a professional. That dude is a pro bucket getter, and he can still do it. And he's on a very reasonable and team friendly contract. Whether he remains a starter or at some point something happens that you start to look at him in a backup role, that could go either way. But I do think there are going to be discussions. I just don't think it's inevitable that he won't be here at the start of the season.
Yeah, Jason Anderson from the Bee. We talked about that earlier, how a lot of people around here are assuming he's on his way out. A lot of people are assuming he's on his way out to Miami, and it's really silly to assume that. Want to ask you, I know a lot of this, Jason, we're asking you to peer into your basketball crystal ball, and who knows, so we don't mean to put you in an awkward position, but the media watch party for the first round tomorrow, in your mind, is it any kind of indication of what the Kings are hoping to do in that first round?
No, I wouldn't read too much into that. It certainly could be, but you wouldn't want to, because something could happen.
Yeah.
At my last check, I don't know if that was overstated to any degree when some of that stuff came out about them aggressively looking to move into the first round and that they were telling agents this and that. But it certainly is possible. And whether there's any kind of deal in place or in the works at this point, or whether something were to come together, at the 11th hour when they're on the clock or somebody's on the clock tomorrow at number 20 or 21 or, whatever, it could happen. And you would, we need to be there for that. And so that's all I would read into that. I don't think it necessarily foretells anything. To you, if I can, real quick, to your point about DeMar in Miami, I know your guy, Alan Stiles, the self-proclaimed very handsome and whatever he said earlier, Alan, he reported recently, and I reported the same thing, that the Kings had not actually had discussions with Miami about DeMar. And I reported that as well. And I can say the same for Malik in Toronto. Last I heard, there's just a lot of buzz about that. And again, I think they've talked to those teams, but to my knowledge, at least as of recently, they had not talked to those teams about those players. So just kind of putting that out there to reiterate something I reported, I think, last week.
What is the world coming to? And I'm kidding here, but Jason Anderson is aggregating Alan Stiles.
Oh, my gosh, I know, right?
I did not aggregate Alan Stiles. I had my own. In fact, I was sat on that for a few days before I wrote it. So I don't know. Not aggregating.
I know you're not. I'm kidding.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. But if I did, I would do it accurately.
Let me ask you this, Jason, because it's a wild time right now in sports media and sports reporting with social media and everything. When somebody posts something on Twitter, do you check into whatever it is, however outlandish it may be? How do you sort of navigate through everybody's sources nowadays in sports media?
Yeah, I mean, look, this stuff can come from anywhere. Not we all, but many people. There are many people across the landscape in sports journalism in the NBA. Information comes from everywhere. It can come from agents, teams, people up and down the ladder. It can come from anywhere. No one, like somebody I don't know could have information that is relevant and important to what's happening here. But I have to look into that. When I see something, I'm going to check with people I know. I'm going to do my best to try to, to confirm that, or maybe get some other context if needed. And sometimes you can get that, sometimes you can't. But in the event that you can't, there are a lot of things I just I don't want to say ignore, but don't repeat. Like a lot of this stuff, even in the last couple of weeks, I haven't touched any of it. Not any of it, but much of it. I didn't go and repeat or write about or even tweet about or do anything like that, just because I either had different information or I didn't have enough to back it up or feel like I was, I don't know, repeating something that was credible. And so, like, I do look closely at that stuff. Sometimes sometimes you are going to go ahead and say, according to so-and-so, the Kings are looking at this, or this team is looking at that. And it's kind of nature of the beast. And we do need to do that to inform our readers of what's out there and what might be going on. But I do, the best I can to try to parse through it and not spread misinformation.
Jason Anderson from the Bee. Jason is, as you know, I worked for many years with my friend Mark Kreidler, who was a beat writer for many years for the Padres. And one of the smartest things he ever told me was always go to the beat writers first. That's why we always appreciate you being on. I know you guys don't always have all the information, but the beat writers are the ones who typically know first. So we appreciate your time with us here. Point guard or moving back into but getting into the first round. I guess you look at the timetable here, moving into the first round is probably the priority for the Kings right now, since the first round is tomorrow.
No, well, I don't know if I'd say that. The priority, as I understand it, is the point guard spot.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think that that's connected to the draft. I don't, whether you're looking at the first round or the number 42, I don't know that you can count on any immediate help, for what the Kings want to do at either range. So I think the point guard spot is their top priority. I think the question is whether they find like the long-term solution now, or whether they end up building kind of a bridge. And I've written this too. It's possible they go with a bridge to the future rather than the long-term solution, but they do know they need a point guard, and that whether that's a star guy who's going to come in and be a part of this team for years to come, or whether it's a facilitator that maybe they get with the mid-level exception or some portion of that. I think remains to be seen. They also want to add length and athleticism, as Scott Perry has talked about. There are a bunch of those guys potentially out there, whether via trade or free agency. And so I think they need to look at their options. They're somewhat limited in terms of spending. They're going to be over the cap. My understanding is they're not going into the tax for this team and this group right now where they're at in their timeline, but they are over the cap. So they have their trade assets, which includes the guys on the roster and a bunch of first-round picks over the next 7 years, some second-round picks. And then, they have their mid-level exception, the biannual. They have some trade exceptions, which can get a little tricky to use. But so they've got to look at those two avenues. And in my mind, I think you almost have to make a choice of, are you gonna use if you're going to act on both of those now, you can use the trade assets to make one move where I think you could go get a higher price player, and then you start to get into your mid-level exception, biannual exception, and those would be lower costs, guys like 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 million range. I think you probably have to choose where you're going to allocate, that money or those assets. But again, something could shake up and other things could break loose, and then they might, end up being able to get things done a different way. But that's kind of my read on it right now.
We know you're busy, Jason. We'll let you get back to it. We can't wait to find out what's going to happen. We look forward to your coverage. Jason Anderson, thanks for your time, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
All right, Jason.
And we have this. Thank you, Jason, on the text line. Grant Afseth.
Your boy.
Ask this loser about my Hawks reporting.
How's he got any time to report, do his job when he's on our text line all the time, right?
That's one of the funniest things ever.
I know, right?
Like that guy texts us, and then Alan goes to the real Grant accent. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you upset? The guy's like, what are you talking about?
Dude, this is ridiculous, man. This is awesome, man.
Okay.
All right.
When we come back, you want to talk about my Kings point guard solution of the day, or do you want to get into the A stuff?
We got to get into these. I got to get into these. Yeah, we got to get into
the groundbreaking. Back with that. Drive Guys on Sactown Sports.
Finally, an easy way to find home improvement